On the words Atem Nitzovim in the beginning of the Parsha, Rashi tells us as many as 3 different explanations on these words, and the Rebbe is going to want to know, why does Rashi need all of these explanations? The first thing Rashi tells us is, on Atem Nitzovim Hayoim, this teaches us that Moshe Rabbeinu gathered the Yidden the day he passed away, gathers them in front of Hashem to bring them into a bris with Hashem. The question is, what is Rashi teaching us over here? The pasuk itself says, La'avrucha bevris, to have you pass in this covenant, in this bris with Hashem. So some Mefarshim want to say that Rashi is trying to teach us that Moshe Rabbeinu gathered the Yidden. Moshe Rabbeinu Rashi is telling us that Melamed is teaching us that he gathered all the Yidden, because in order to bring them to this bris, he first needs to gather them. The question is, if that's what Rashi is trying to teach us, then Rashi should have quoted from the pasuk also the words La'avrucha bevris. Number 2, Rashi should have, instead of using the words Lahachnisam bevris, should have used a word similar to the pasuk Laha'aviram, like La'avrucha Laha'aviram bevris. And besides, the Rebbe says, it sounds from Rashi that his main point he's trying to make is that the purpose of them standing here and gathering now is in order to bring them into this covenant, not that he gathered them. But again, to bring them into the covenant, the pasuk itself says. A few psukim later, after Rashi finishes this section of the first few psukim, Rashi returns to Atem Nitzovim, and he brings another 2 explanations. He says, why does Atem Nitzovim come after the curses that were said in the previous Parsha? Because the Yidden were starting obviously to get all worried and concerned and so on, and Moshe Rabbeinu is now appeasing them that they have nothing to worry about. They made Hashem angry a lot of times, but Hashem never destroyed them. Rather, Atem Nitzovim, you're standing firm and strong. And then Rashi says, on the word Hayoim, what does it mean, Atem Nitzovim Hayoim? You stand like the day itself. The day itself stands strong and forever. Even after it gets dark, the day returns. So too the Yidden. Then Rashi gives us a further pshat on Atem Nitzovim Hayoim. That is, that because the Yidden were now going to be going from Moshe Rabbeinu to Yeshua, Moshe Rabbeinu now needs to give them the extra encouragement as they go to the new leader. So they're Atem Nitzovim Hayoim. He's giving them, he's making matzeva is the word Rashi uses. In other words, he's gathering them all in an encouraging way as they go to the new leader. So we need to understand what was the problem with the first Pirush, for which Rashi needed another 2 Pirushim, and in what way is the second Pirush closer to Pshuti Shel Mikra than the third, and that's why the order in the way Rashi puts them. Another thing that Rebbe says we need to understand is, seemingly all of the psukim would change their meaning based on the way we explain Atem Nitzovim Hayoim. And yet, Rashi only explains one word in the second Pirush that Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to encourage the Yidden. That was the second Pirush after all the curses. Rashi explains one more word, the word Hayoim. Doesn't find it necessary to explain any of the other psukim based on this new Pirush. So why was the word Hayoim needed to be explained? In order to understand this, the Rebbe says, simply, the way this Parsha is coming from, where it's coming from, is we had in the end of the previous Parsha, after the curses in fact, it says, Vayikra Moshe Rabbeinu calls all the Yidden. He tells them about all the miracles that had happened, and all the things that went on in Mitzrayim and so on, and then concludes with them to fulfill all the words of Torah and mitzvahs. And simply, the Parsha Atem Nitzovim is now coming another point and a continuation to this gathering. This is what Rashi is trying to tell us. Rashi is saying, you know why Moshe Rabbeinu gathered them at the end of the previous Parsha? It was really the purpose of the gathering was for the bris that's going to be discussed right now. In other words, not the way we would have understood that first Moshe Rabbeinu calls the Yidden and he tells them some things about the miracles and tells them to keep Torah and mitzvahs. And then there's another point, Atem Nitzovim Hayoim. But rather, the whole purpose of that gathering in the previous Parsha was actually for what we're going to discuss now about this bris. And the previous psukim, about the things that happened in Mitzrayim and all of that, they were almost just like an introduction or by the way. And what's forcing Rashi to say this is, because number one, since Moshe Rabbeinu already called the Yidden, and they're all standing here in the previous Parsha, why is he now suddenly starting with Atem Nitzovim? That should have been said before. Also, why is he saying you're standing lefnei Hashem Elokeichem? They're standing in front of Moshe, and he's telling them all these beautiful, wonderful things about the miracles and so on. Why is he suddenly saying you're standing in front of Hashem? Another point is, what does Hayoim refer to? Atem Nitzovim Hayoim. Simply, this is referring to the day Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. If it was mainly about what says in the previous parsha, he's going to give them encouragement to keep Torah and mitzvahs and so on and so forth, then why is he waiting till the very last moment before he passes away? This is what's forcing Rashi to say that the purpose of why Moshe Rabbeinu calls them in the previous parsha was actually for this new bris that's going to be made now because the Yidden are about to go into Eretz Yisrael. And those words at the previous parsha, those few psukim about the miracles and all of that, was more like an introduction to this bris that we're about to discuss. This will also help us understand why the children are being called. Atem Nitzovim Hayom Kulchem. Everyone's being called, even the little children. We don't usually find this in the Torah. But because we're about to make a bris with all of the Yidden, it is relevant for the children to be there. Also, usually before a bris, a shvuah, a promise, an oath, a new oath is being made, there should be some words of encouragement being given first before telling the Yidden to take this upon yourself. According to the way we're explaining it, it makes very much sense. Those are the last few words in Parsha Savai, is that encouragement about all the miracles that Hashem did for us. And now, based on all of that, that's leading in to Atem Nitzovim Hayom Kulchem. We're about to enter with a new bris with Hashem. Now, what's the problem with this pirush that Rashi needs more pirushim? The issue number one is the word Nitzovim itself. Nitzovim means standing firm and standing strong. When we're about to enter with a bris with Hashem, we actually should be under the mode of bitul, hachna, feeling subdued, etc., not standing there all proud and strong. And this is why Rashi has a problem with the word Nitzovim, so he brings us another pirush in the Medrash Haggadah. That Moshe Rabbeinu was actually telling the Yidden, you're standing firm and strong, but in a different context. This is coming as a continuation to the curses that were said before, and the Yidden are all concerned and worried. Moshe Rabbeinu is now saying, no, Atem Nitzovim, you're going to stand strong for all times. Based on this, the word Hayom is also going to change. We can no longer say Hayom means the day he passed away. It's coming in continuation to the curses. It doesn't make sense to say that that will happen the day he passes away. Number one, if he's trying to encourage them to do Torah and mitzvahs, that should happen much earlier than passing away. And number two, it doesn't make sense he was cursing them on the day he's passing away. On the contrary, we find Moshe Rabbeinu benches the Yidden on the day he's passing away. And therefore, Rashi says that the translation of Hayom has a different meaning. It means that the Yidden are like the day itself, as we explained before, stand strong as the day that keeps on shining again and again. And Rashi also tells us clearly that those psukim in the previous parsha were all part of the way Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to appease the Yidden after the curses. The difficulty with this pirush will be, number one, if that's the case, the words Atem Nitzovim then should have been said right after the Teichacha, after those curses, because seemingly that's the main point, that Hashem didn't destroy you and you're going to stand strong. Also, why is it relevant for the children to be there? The whole Teichacha is not shaykh to them. And this is why Rashi now brings another pirush, that they're going from one leader to the next, from Moshe to Yeshua. Based on that, the word Hayom is going to mean simply, this is the day because Moshe Rabbeinu is passing away. Now they're going to be going from Moshe to Yeshua. It will also be understood why he first says those psukim of Atem Re'isem, the previous parsha where he speaks about all the miracles that happened, and he leaves Atem Nitzovim for a little bit later, because this will be closer to the time he's passing away. It'll also be understood why the children need to be there, because they too are going to this new leader. The problem, however, with this pirush is that it should have been said even much later, much closer to the time Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, like at the end of Parshas Vayelech. The Rebbe says, the second pirush regarding how Moshe Rabbeinu is strengthening them, encouraging them after the rebuke, this will be closer to Pshuta Shel Mikra, because that, in fact, now makes sense why Atem Nitzovim is flowing from the parsha of the last psukim in Parshas Kisavai, where we're speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu encouraging the Yidden, and also it's the whole purpose of why Moshe Rabbeinu gathers the Yidden. At the end of Parshas Kisavai, it's all one flow, where he speaks to them about the miracles that happened, and tells them, Atem Nitzovim, you're standing strong, and that's why, according to this pirush, will be a little bit closer to Pshuta Shel Mikra than the third pirush, which then again, this whole Atem Nitzovim should have been said much, much later. Then the Rebbe goes to Yeina Shel Torah. The Rebbe says, we know that Parshas Nitzovim, we always read before Rosh Hashanah, and it's hinted in the fact that Hayom Atem Nitzovim, Hayom refers to Rosh Hashanah, as it says in Chassidus. Rashi comes along and tells us that even though Moshe Rabbeinu had encouraged the Yidden already in the past for Torah and mitzvahs, yet he's making a special gathering now on the day he passes away, which is like the Yom Adin, like Rosh Hashanah, for the purpose of making a bris, this covenant of becoming united, one with Hashem. But as an introduction to that, as we explained from Rashi, there first needs to be the general encouragement for all of Torah and mitzvahs. That is, that we first are Mekayim Torah and mitzvahs, and then we come into this bigger bond. The Rebbe says this is similar to the idea. We know that there's three knots that connect with each other, the Eibishter, the Torah, and the Yidden. And the question is often asked, why three knots? If three things are connecting, there's two knots. And the idea is that, yes, first of all, we have the connection of the Yidden with the Eibishter through the Torah, but then is revealed a deeper bond, a deeper connection, like this bris that comes after we are doing Torah and mitzvahs, but then is revealed a much deeper connection between Hashem and the Yidden. And afterwards, even after we have the bris, we need it to come down in a revealed way, by the Eibishter giving us lots of ruchnis and gashmis, b'toiv ha'nirva ha'nigla. Just like the Eibishter wants from us, Hamaiso Ha'ikar, we should have and do b'poil mamish all of the inyanim. The same thing we ask Hashem, that everything should come out in Maisa b'poil. And this is what Rashi continues in the next Pirush, that Moshe Rabbeinu starts appeasing and encouraging the Yidden that they're standing strong in front of Hashem, and even more than that all the negative things will be transformed into positive things, b'toiv hanirav hanigla.